Joining me is the panel, Steve Conroy, former Labor Senator and Cabinet Minister, and Liberal Senator Holly Hughes. Thanks for joining me, but let's start with the Queen's death. Steve, you were born in England, so maybe this resonates more with you than perhaps other people. The reaction in Australia, what is that telling you?
Well, look, yeah, I was born in England. I grew up till I was nearly 11, and as most, 85% odd of the British people, love the Queen, all of that. But proudly Australian citizen, proudly a Republican. But look, it's sad. She was someone who conducted herself with dignity. And I think the reaction in Australia is appropriate. I think people should respect her family, obviously grieving. And Australians are right to mark this as an event, but ultimately the debate will move on. But people should be willing to respect and honour the service that she provided. She's been someone that deserves it, and that doesn't change my views towards us wanting to be a republic. But now it's not the time for it, and I've been quite. Adam Bant's just low rent, showing that he's got no class whatsoever. Any opportunity to get himself in the newspapers and try and be outrageous. Just distasteful and really poor timing.
What do you think, Holly Hughes? Just judging the overall reaction, there's extremists on some side, there's very emotional monarchists on the other, but generally, what sort of reaction are you picking up?
Look, we've had lots of requests to my office with regards to people wanting portraits of the Queen. I think, though, there's almost been, with some people, a sense of shock. And I think, on one level, we all know that she was a 96-year-old woman who was becoming increasingly frail. But on the other hand, she has been there for the majority of Australians' lives, that she has reigned over this nation with such dedication and such service, that I think people just in one aspect thought that she would always be there as that figure of stability. I think it was interesting today, Roy Morgan's done some research, and 60% of Australians still favour the monarchy. And I think that sentiment is very, very clear at the moment with the outpouring of grief. And I think with the respect that we've seen the ascension of King Charles III.
Now, actually, in the Australian context, if we were starting afresh, I'd be a Republican, but we're not. I'm a constitutional monarchist. But I have to admit, Steve, that the commemorations, while they are very beautiful, they are moving. For the British, they must be extremely uniting. Just seeing, for instance, the pictures of Prince Charles and the Queen's other children maintaining a vigil at a coffin as it lay in state in Edinburgh. All this seemed to me very British, and much as I hate to admit it, perhaps less engaging for us as Australian subjects of the new king. Like I say, I don't want to admit it, but I feel a loss of connection. What do you think?
No, look, I think it's right. This is incredibly moving for the Queen of England. And I know she visited here many times, and she did, tremendous work. As I think one of your other speakers said, in regional Australia. So she had a connection. King Charles, he's been here a few times. He did his time down in Geelong, and he definitely has an affection for the country. But I think it'll be very hard for him to build up the same degree of rapport with the Australian public. He's already in his 60s or 70s. He's been waiting a long time to become the king. So I think it's just going to be harder for him to establish himself in the same way the Queen has throughout our entire life. She's been a constant. And Charles will struggle to reach out to all of the Commonwealth and engage them in the same way the Queen did over such a long period of time. So I think, I like you, I'm watching these wonderful scenes in the UK, and I'm respect the role that she's played, but increasingly I think it will just something. I think you're right. I think there will be just a little bit less engagement with the Australian public and King Charles. He just won't have the time to build that rapport.
Holly Hughes, pull me back into line.
Andrew, you know how much I very much enjoy doing that. I think King Charles will connect with Australians. And I think, there was at the beginning, Camilla and Charles's relationship was certainly one thing that was marred during Princess Diana's life. But I think most people now genuinely accept that this is basically a love story for the ages. They have a genuine love for each other. I think she will be a wonderful Queen consort. I think the two of them will work wonderfully together. And I think the Australian people also have a very genuine affection for the now Prince of Wales and Princess of Wales. And I think both Wills and Kate will do a remarkable job. We're hearing today that visits to Australia are planned. And I have no doubt the crowds that we have seen previously will turn out again to see them. I don't think the Republican movement, despite Stephen, but more so the people leading the Australian Republican movement, did themselves any favour by putting out a statement so quickly after the Queen had passed. And in fact, before the Prime Minister had even made a statement, I think it was tacky. The Greens, of course, who revel in base, almost trying just to shock with their absolutely disgraceful behaviour, excelled themselves, both Maureen Faruqi and Adam Bant, with their tweets on the day that the Queen passed. And I don't think Australians will respect or respond to that. I think over time, and again, yes, Charles won't have as long as King, as he's not probably going to live to 150 or 145. At 75, he's the eldest person to ever accede to be monarch, and the Queen had a 70-year reign. I don't think we're going to see that again. But Prince Charles is now King Charles III. He's very well known to Australians. He had a wonderful time at Geelong Grammar and refers to it as the happiest days of his schooling. And I think that connection will become very apparent quickly as they attempt to visit all of the realms of the Commonwealth.
But here's my thing, picking up from what Holly said, and you mentioned Adam Bant, Steve Conroy, when I do see how the Greens have reacted, I mean, it's been so crass and so brutal, and they do represent what is about 12-13% of the voters. When I see how the race warriors have been calling her a colonialist, refusing to hold a minute's silence, no grace, no dignity, and I'm thinking, well, people like that, and I know they don't represent the whole Republican movement, although Peter Fitzsimons does.
They clearly don't.
I don't trust them with a republic. I don't trust them with a treaty. I don't trust them with any change to the way we're ruled. And this is why I am a constitutional monarchist, because I do not trust these people to remake the way that we are ruled. They've got too much hatred for our past, too much hatred for our institutions. They've got too many other agendas. Don't they need to change gear here? Celebrate instead of attacking.
I think I was lucky enough to be at the footy on Saturday night watching Collingwood, get through to a preliminary final. Yeah, go Pies. But before the game, there was the minute silence
Steve,
for the
that's
Queen.
enough of the Collingwood stuff.
But there was a minute silence for the Queen, and it was pretty well observed. There were 90,000 people at the G.
Yeah.
There were some people who didn't observe it, but the vast majority did. Equally, though, Andrew, I would say this to you, there was also a welcome to country. And the vast majority of the crowd responded positively to that as well. So I think that, the Australian public are able to have a view on respecting the Queen and the monarchy, and also have a view on, the representation and increasing representation of Indigenous Australia within our life. So I think a 90,000 crowd at the G was able to manage both of those things. So I know you say you don't trust, and I can understand that. I don't always agree with you on some of these issues, but on a random sample of 90,000, frankly 85,000 Collingwood fans, I think they respected both of those positions.
Well, that is true, but then again, the AFL did then cancel the minute silence for the women's competition, which I think was an utter disgrace. Holly, I hope you're not now going to really eject me from the Conservative club here. I actually have to say that Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, has been excellent in his response to the Queen's death. He's followed tradition, he's stressed tradition, he's refused to talk about a republic, he's maintained the dignity and respect, called a public holiday. I think it's all been excellent. Although I have to then add that today there was this false note not ruling out refusing to put the new King's head on the back of the $5 note, as we've had, or the Queen's head has been there. He refused to say that Charles would be as well. Here he is.
Would you like to see an Australian on the $5 note going forward?
I think with a lot of these decisions and questions, to preempt them, you know, I'm speaking about a funeral that will take place of Queen Elizabeth II on next Monday, and I'm being asked a question about her replacement on the $5 note. I think this is a time where a bit of respect is required.
What's that about, Holly? It's not a hard question.
Well, I saw today there was some mock-ups of what King Charles III's face will look like on the back of our coins. I think it's a very sensible substitution for the Mint to move to King Charles to be on the $5 note. There are certain things, and you and I obviously understand this, as the very nature of conservatism is respect for institutions and tradition. And I have absolutely no problem, and I would say most Australians would have no problem and actually would think it's completely appropriate that the King's face does go on the $5 note. I will agree with you that there has been generally very few missteps, if any, by Prime Minister Albanese through this period. I think there's potential for some coming. Even the sitting week he's hastily put together, he won't even be there for 2 of the 3 days, so I'm not quite sure why that was the week he picked. But certainly when it comes to honouring the traditions, and obviously these would have all been pre-planned. We knew that there were plans for the Queen's death wherever it occurred, and have been for a multitude of decades. So I'm sure, you know, all of these protocols were already in place, but he has certainly adhered to them.
I'm not sure what you can call the protocol if it hasn't been used in 70 years, but there you go. Holly Hughes and Stephen Conroy, thank you both so much for your time.